House to Home, presented by RE/MAX Diamond Realty.
Hafide and hello, everybody. I'm Jason Salas, back again like we never left on a Tuesday, and Liz Duenas is joining me from RE/MAX Diamond Realty. And if you remember last week, we were talking here on House to Home about wills and trusts and properties, why it's so critical that you actually set that up, what it could possibly do to you down the road if you don't get it all squared away. And somebody who has lectured on many, many occasions, I've been fortunate to have been privy to those, is attorney Mickey Flynn. He is an expert in this topic. So Liz and I are going to dialogue with Mickey and pick his brain about something. He's forgotten more about wills and trusts than most of us will ever know. So Mickey, a great pleasure as always to have you along for the ride.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you on our show. Gina and I always emphasize we're not attorneys. We're just talking based on our experiences when we deal with our clients. So it's perfect that you're here and that you could give another perspective, especially when legal paperwork is required. And sometimes people don't realize what the undivided interest is or what paperwork is needed if they're planning on getting their estate together, so that when something happens, they're prepared and they won't have a big headache at the end. So maybe you can explain what you do and how you handle some of these cases that come before you.
Sure. Thank you, Liz. And once again, thank you, Jason. What I would look to at the very outset is the idea that planning is done ahead of time. So if you're already facing a challenge or a problem with, for example, you've suggested undivided interest, you're probably behind the 8 ball. You haven't done the planning, or your parents or those fortunate enough to have assets to pass on to you haven't done planning ahead of time. So that's the first thing to consider, how to get your affairs in order. You mentioned and planning, and you mentioned getting your stuff in order. So, you really don't need to do a lot of work and get an attorney involved if you want to do at least something. So that would necessitate, perhaps getting some folders together, marking each folder with a topic, for example, my real property assets or house, bills, life insurance, things of that sort. And you put all of your stuff in order by placing these various documents in folders, so that if you should become mentally incapacitated or pass away, which will happen to all of us, then at least those who are looking for help or information and guidance as to what to do next will have a treasure trove of documentation that they can pursue and use to help themselves and help others along the path of addressing your estate issues. If you're not going down that simple path of simply putting stuff in order, and you're inclined to do a bit more, let's say you do have this idea, wow, I've seen this horror story that involved my cousins or other family members concerning undivided interests. Wow, what should I do to make sure that doesn't happen with my assets? Then you'd want to do some planning. And the estate planning gives you an opportunity to ensure that you have control over all your assets at the time that you're alive and well. And in the event that you become mentally incompetent, you're able to control what happens to those assets and how they benefit you. And then ultimately, when we pass away, you will have indicated who will receive what assets or who will use what assets when and how. So that's what the plan, and you also want to be able to ensure that you have control over the costs of all of that type of planning work. So that's really what planning is about, addressing those issues ahead of time. And in order to develop a plan that's going to work for you and is appropriate for you, it's best to meet with a competent planner and then work with that planner to identify your goals and objectives. So you want to identify, for example, this issue that came up with your loved ones, undivided interest. Wow, this was really a problem for them. So how do we avoid this problem? What can I do with respect to my planning to ensure that doesn't happen to me? But there may be other goals, much more general in nature than simply undivided interest. For example, it may be your goal to avoid the probate costs or the probate in general. So it may be costs that you're concerned with, or delay, complications, or publicity. So, working with your planner, you can set up a plan to identify how best to address that goal or objective of yours. Your goal may be to identify and possibly address the issues of estate taxes. It may be to address a concern that you have with a minor child, or perhaps a child with special needs, a disabled child. It may be a concern of yours that revolves around planning for the possibility that you may become mentally incompetent, either through an accident or through old age. So you also may be planning for adult children who are chronologically adult in nature, but perhaps not financially savvy enough to manage their own assets. And so all of these things would be discussed, or at least identified with a competent estate planner, and then that planner would work with you to develop a plan that works.
These more often
for
than
you.
not, counselor, are lawyers like yourself. When you say like competent, like knowledgeable, learned estate planners, these would be typically attorneys, right? Because Liz has even said, we can guide you in the right direction, but by no means are we saying,
Right.
this is what, because we're not lawyers.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Jason and Liz. Of course, I defer to Liz and to others in her profession when it comes to real estate issues. I'm not a realtor. I'm not licensed to practice real estate. And so if it concerned real estate matters, or insurance matters, or banking matters, or financial matters, then I would bring on, as part of a team, experts in that area. So it may be a tax issue, and so we reach out to the client's CPA, or a real estate matter, touch base with the realtor who's closely involved with the client, or find a realtor that would work suitably with that person. So when it comes to the legal matters, you're right. You want a professional, someone who has been educated, who's experienced in that area of law, and who can use the training and experience that the education, training, and experience that they've been licensed for, to the benefit of that client. So similarly, if you have other areas where expertise is needed, then it's time to tap on the knowledge and expertise that those experts have.
Okay, well, tell you what, we are going to break right here, and make sure to join us for part 2, because we are going to talk with attorney Mickey Flynn about more of what goes into setting up an estate plan, making sure you do it right so that it doesn't come back and bite you in the rear end further down the line. So make sure to check that out for part 2. We'll see you next time, guys.